My next guest is Valentina White-Rideaux. Valentina is a former special education teacher and current owner of IDEA Reimagined, a firm that provides training and professional development services exclusively to special education teachers and leaders. Her company's mission is to increase student achievement for struggling students and those with disabilities. She is also a doctoral student and college instructor, researching special education teacher preparation. Welcome to the podcast, Valentina.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it was a pleasure to kind of chat with you a few months ago about your firm and how you got started with that. So we'll discuss that on the podcast and some of the services that you offer. But let's start off with the question I ask everybody. Tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
Let's see. Well, for me, I guess I can go back to my earlier years growing up and having learning issues and challenges, and being able to crawl out of that during a time when there was very little opportunities. When I was in school, you was either on one end of the continuum where you was completely isolated, self-contained. There was no programs for kids that just was struggling. And so I kind of managed to crawl my way out of it. And in middle school was probably the most difficult time for me, just because in middle school, everything you learn in elementary school kind of comes to a head. And there were so many gaps. And so I repeated 7th grade twice. I became a behavior problem. And I love to learn. I love to read. I love to, I just couldn't make the connection, And so I was placed in this program after I repeated, was going to be in 7th grade for the 3rd time. So they put me in this program for like overage middle school students so that we can get our GED and have a life, get a job or whatever. And so it was during that time that the teacher in that program was, he was a special ed teacher. This was his last year. He was retiring. And so he was, I guess, just gonna finish off the year doing that. I don't know if he had done it previously, but I was on target to get my GED. And so you have to take a test so they can see where you are, so that they can help you get to that point where you can take the test and pass and get your diploma. That's where I was. I was 15, and they figured another 2 or 3 years of getting me ready, and I'd be ready to get a GED. So I met this man. He tested me. Long story short, he tested me, and he asked me, older man, much older, and he called me to his desk and he said, "What are you doing in this class?" And I was like, "Well, I'm too old to be in middle school, whatever." And so they put me here. And he said, "Your scores you don't have any scores that's lower than 10th grade." And at the time I was supposed to be in like the 9th grade. He said, "Some of these scores, you could actually get your GED tomorrow." Like, I don't understand. He was baffled. He didn't understand why I scored so high. And then he looked at my grades and saw how low they were. Long story short, he was like, "I'm going to get you out of here. And you have to promise me that you're never going to repeat a grade. If you do what you have to do, but you never are going to repeat a grade. Your goal is to get a high school diploma and make something of yourself, because the system failed you, So we spent the whole school year, and he grilled me, and he was the first person to say, "I think you're smart." Like, you're smart. And it's when you tell a child that they're smart, I don't know, they believe you. You're a teacher. You say, "Well, you're smart." Well, okay, I believe you. So he all through that year. And so he went to the principal, and he went to this committee, because it wasn't like an IEP, because I wasn't technically a student receiving special education services. I was just in a program. So, but there was still like a building level committee. And this was in the 80s. I mean, this was a long time ago.
Yeah.
So, and he told them, he's like, "I want her to go from 7th grade. I want her in high school," is what he told them. They said she has the scores, but then my behavior wasn't a behavior problem at that time. I was really focused. And so I don't know what he told them, but he wanted me out of that program. He wanted me back on track to get a high school diploma. And so I left middle school and I went to high school. And I never repeated a grade. Now, granted, I graduated at the bottom of my class, but I graduated and I never repeated again. And so that was my trenches moment. And that's when I knew that there were other people like me. And so that kind of put me, on that path to becoming an educator, pulling myself out of that situation. Because so many people were in my situation that didn't get the opportunity and they ended up dropping out and they ended up, going down different paths. And I feel like I went through that for a reason, so that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. That's my why, in other words.
Mhm. Definitely, that's manifested in your professional life. So tell me a little bit about when you started, teaching special education. You said at the beginning of your career, you were underprepared for all the compliance work, and the fact that you can't teach special ed in a vacuum. So how did you work together with some of your co-teachers?
The first year was difficult because in college, the perspective that you receive from your teachers about what you're walking into it wasn't a reality for me. I can't say it. It's like that for everybody. But so I had when I first started teaching, I had a master's degree in special education, and so I thought, oh, I got this. Because I have an advanced degree. You make it sound like it means something. And so you go into the classroom. First of all, they know you're a first year teacher. And when I say they, I mean general ed teachers. And so they were like, go run these papers off. Go do this at the office. Go, because and I understand. They don't know me. They don't trust me. I haven't earned, maybe they felt I haven't earned a right to provide services. I don't know. I can't, I'm just guessing. But the first year was rough because I didn't have that confidence. I walked in the classroom and the teacher's up doing her whole group instruction. And I'm standing there and I'm like, well, I can't go and teach with her because she's teaching math. And I can't, teach that. Yeah. I can show them how I learned it and the strategies I used when I was struggling to understand it. But it was difficult because the teacher was always in front of the classroom. So it's like, okay, well, when am I, so it was a lot of, we just didn't have those assigned roles, like you do this and I'm going to do that. It wasn't that. It was like, I walk in and it's like, oh, hey, how you doing? And then, it's like, I was kind of like not there. So the first year was rough. And then I started doing an ed specialist degree, and I took some classes, and you have access to the library for the university. And so I started looking up co-teaching strategies and, doing some independent research. And then I started to implement those things in the classroom, like strategies, like how to chunk stuff. I had to learn that in my master's program, how to chunk information for students that, have a hard time reading, a long list of a long article or something like that. How to math strategies, how to, teach writing, how to break it down into smaller parts. Like all of those things I learned on my own. And then I started to implement them according to the students' needs. And so it just kind of just happened. And when I would go into the classrooms, the teachers were like, can you do this? And so we began slowly. We became a team, but it took time. It took about 2 years. It took a lot of time and trust and understanding that if, I needed that teacher to do this, that she would do it, and, vice versa. So once I figured out what I needed to do, it worked out, and so after that, it was just great. I love co-teaching because it's just like, you're hanging out with your friend while you're teaching the kids. it's good for the kids because you're modeling acceptable behavior when you have that mutual respect. I just think that it's not just for the kids with disabilities, it's for all the kids, like it makes everybody better.
So now you're actually teaching co-teaching strategies at LSU. So what are some strategies that you would advise special ed teachers or even ELL teachers to do when they're co-teaching in content area classrooms? Because a lot of these things I'm hearing from you, I think a lot of people new to co-teaching are encountering, right? And not knowing kind of their role and responsibility and how to teach also the students you're serving in that content area.
My advice to a brand spanking new teacher before they start, to get 3 good strategies in each area. Get you 3 really good math strategies. Get you 3 really good literacy strategies. Get you 3 good writing strategies. And for behavior, find something that can work for you, because, it's all in the implementation. And so if you have that toolbox with just 3, because, sometimes when you have too many choices, you can't make a choice. So, you walk in with that, and at least, if you have a classroom of 6 or 7 kids that need you may have 3 ELL students and 3 students with disabilities, and you have to kind of maneuver between the 2. At least, one of those strategies is going to help, and it's not going to hurt for sure. And then from there, you can say, well, this didn't work, that didn't work, that didn't work. Well, let me find something else. At least you knew what's not going to work. And it's better than doing nothing, which is a lot of special ed teachers, they're paralyzed because they don't want to do the wrong thing. And they don't want to, so my advice would be to have a toolbox of sorts and go from there. And then you'll see how to build up. Before you know it, you just have a whole library full of stuff, and you'll be the person that everybody's going to go to. I find myself doing more consulting when my last couple of years in the classroom, they would come to me and say, well, this is the data. This is what the student is having problems with. What do you think we should do? So just start somewhere, do some research.
Yeah, and as you said, it did take a few years to build up your relationship with the co-teacher, to really feel like you were having a good impact on the students as well. So it's kind of a trial and error, like you say, right? So now you're working kind of outside the classroom, and your business helps prepare special ed teachers. You told me that you coach also uncertified teachers, maybe people who are working in a paraprofessional role. So tell me a little bit about what you do to prepare them for a role, maybe before they get started at a school, or if they're new to a school building and need support.
Well, we have a lot of teachers, special ed teachers, new teachers that aren't certified. And I shouldn't say this, but I will. The certification doesn't really matter when it comes to special ed, because you're not going to learn what you need to be effective in your degree program anyway. And I teach this, on a university level. I mean, you need a degree to teach. I agree.
Yeah.
But special ed it's an on-the-job thing. Yeah. So there's no distinction between someone with a degree, a master's degree in special ed, and somebody who has the willingness to do it. There's no difference, because you still have to learn it on the job. So my approach with that particular group is no different than if someone is certified in special ed, because the undergraduate part is more about theories and those type of things. They're not saying that you're not going to learn the strategies. All of that you have to do on your own. We don't. There's no time. We have to prepare them to take their praxis and their tests that they have to. It's like 7 tests that teachers have to take. So we teach them hands-on stuff, what you're going to need, behavior issues, because we're dependent on for classroom management. So I make sure that they understand the importance of managing the classroom, and helping the students when they're struggling. That's the core of, the actual teaching part.
Mhm, mhm,
We got the other part where we're doing paperwork and stuff, but that's boring. We're not gonna talk about that.
yeah, yeah. And you mentioned in the pre-chat also there's a lot of special ed teachers leaving the profession at twice the rate as general ed teachers. So how's your business helping you recruit more teachers and keep them in the profession?
Well, they're recruiting a lot of uncertified
Yeah,
people to fill the pipeline because there's, there's, and I don't think it's that people don't want to do special ed. I'll be honest with you. I don't think it's that. I think that there's not enough programs that offer it. Because in
yeah,
Louisiana, we have a lot of programs, but very, very, very few offer special ed. Very few. And if they do, it's on a master's level,
yeah,
So it's more, like I said, theory. So we don't have a choice but to use either paraprofessionals that want to kind of move up, or teachers that with a degree, someone with a degree that wants to teach. And the problem with that is a lot of times they want to get in through the special ed route because it's easier to get a job
mhm,
because of the shortage. And then
yeah,
once they get real good, then they move on to another discipline outside of special ed. So that's another problem, another issue with the pipeline is that, people will use special ed to get in and then they'll leave. And so that's our issue. And we have a lot of initiatives across the country, especially in rural areas, to get more special ed teachers, but there just isn't enough.
mhm.
It's just, so we just train them to do, a good job while they're in the classroom, provide the services that, it works, but in the rural areas, it's still a big problem.
So you work with different districts. You said you work with the district that you taught in previously, but you can also do virtual consulting.
Mhm.
So you said you've been working with the New York City Special Ed Department. So what are some of the things that you're able to provide as professional development for districts that might be looking for some coaching for their special ed teachers?
Well, what I do, and that's why I call it coaching, I try to stay away from like the workshops and
Yeah,
the little seminars and even the 3-hour PDs. I don't find them effective. They've never been effective for me when I was a teacher. I try to, what I do is I go in initially and I do a lot of modeling,
yeah,
a lot of modeling of, examples of when it's done correctly. And then I do some non-examples. And so we kind of unpack that. And then I let them, model, practice on each other, pair up, and practice these strategies. And then I give them some feedback. I let them reflect on it. I let them, let them judge each other. I try to make it as collaborative and interactive as possible. I feel like that's what works. And so as doing it virtually, it's really no different. A lot of times they'll email the video of them doing whatever the assignment is, and they'll email it back and I'll provide my feedback. I do group coaching, we're all on a Zoom together. And we'll look at the video together and everybody will chime in and give their, input, what they saw, what they noticed. And so, special education is usually very isolating,
yeah,
because you're only one of a few. And so doing it like that, there's a camaraderie, there's a, that community building. I think that's important. And so what I offer is very interactive. It's always a group and it's always everybody kind of helping each other, offering
yeah.
support. And so I feel that's effective, and making it ongoing, because a lot of times with, these workshops, it's, you don't see these people again. But so I try to, I'm starting like an online community. I just designed an app, with like, just keep putting resources in as I get them, just kind of staying in touch. so that, if they're having a problem with implementing something, or they have a situation with, a parent, or, whatever, we maintain confidentiality, but, they have an opportunity to bounce things off of each other and help each other out. So I think that works. I think that's what they need.
Yeah, and especially that's a place for people who can talk with other educators throughout the nation. It's not bound to their district, right? They might be encountering some of the same issues that people in different states are encountering, but it's also that level of like they're free to like say kind of what their problem is and not feel like they're being judged by somebody in their district. So yeah, I think that's a great opportunity for people in education across roles. So you told me that you are developing a podcast. So it's on the horizon. It's called Tale of Two Teachers. So tell me about what you'd like to kind of guess, or who would you like to interview on the podcast? Kind of what will that look like?
In my head, it's going to be two teachers, a general ed teacher and a special ed teacher, or EL teacher, or a related professional like a speech therapist or a diagnostician, and just have them together and to get both of their tales, their perspectives. I think there's a lot of unspoken things that happen between two teachers that share that one space. Kind of like, people compare it to marriage. They say, the really good ones are like a good marriage. They communicate, they depend on each other. They have these shared goals. They get to them in different ways. But, and so I see it as two teachers coming together to just tell their tales, come together. And I think the dialogue is going to really help our teachers, our other co-teachers. Because I think co-teaching is what is the best way to educate a diverse group of students, when it's done effectively, of course. So I'm excited about that. I'm really excited about that project.
Yeah, so you'll be kind of reaching out to people that that have a good co-teaching relationship, and kind of talking about how they maybe function, and that'll give tips to others who are maybe new to that co-teaching role. Right.
Well, maybe I might get some that have a bad relationship, and I'll be like Dr. Phyllis.
So I mentioned in the bio that you are currently working on your doctorate, and you sent me a little bit of information. The research is a reactive attachment disorder and disruptive mood dysregulation disorder, and kind of how are you implementing your research into how that'll look for your coaching business and helping teachers? Because I've heard of these disorders, but not being a special ed teacher myself, explain to me a little bit about what that looks like in the classroom.
Well, the research it has a lot to do with, I became a doctoral student after I adopted my two children out of foster care. They were 7 and 10 at the time, and they have those diagnoses. And so I started doing research before I even thought about getting a doctorate, just to understand how to serve their needs, because I never heard of it before. I'm like, what is all these alphabets? Like, what does this mean? And so, so when I started to research it, I realized how it's just so much. And so when I joined the doctoral program, I was like, well, I have all this research in my head. And so it'll be more of a trauma-based, from a trauma-based teaching lens, because most kids that endure trauma have these labels, if you will. So I feel like in my coaching business, it'll probably be something that I will add eventually to my repertoire as far as classroom management and dealing with difficult students, because we have a need for that. I mean, I'm not talking about like a regular cutting class. I'm talking about, violent, aggressive behavior, and where that comes from, the brain science behind it. So my dissertation will probably turn into a book, and that's my focus I don't know if it'll ever be implemented in my coaching business, unless it's just a trauma-informed information that I'm going to give to special ed teachers. But it was more of a personal. It started out
Okay.
as a personal thing, and but I do feel like parents who adopt children, because it's more prevalent in adopted children, especially if they've been in foster care an extended period of time, like my kids were. So I would like it to be informational for parents that don't know, and teachers that don't know. I think if teachers really understood the brain science behind it, it would be different. They would approach managing behaviors in classrooms different. But I haven't figured out where it's going to be in my,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like I'm not there yet. I do know that I'm going to disseminate the information. I just don't know how.
But so you're in your last semester of classes then at LSU, and you're preparing to write your dissertation?
Yes, I've already started.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm almost in the home stretch, because
Okay.
I had researched it so much before I even started, so I had been writing it.
Yeah. So like you said, it'll turn into a book, and it'll be a lot about like how to deal with things as that parent who adopts out of foster care, how to deal with things that no one tells you what to expect, right? That's kind of that manual for like some of
Right.
those behavior diagnoses, like you're saying.
Mhm.
There's I'm sure adoptive parent groups, but like
Oh yeah.
not everybody's living the same story, and having that type of manual will definitely be useful. Yeah,
Yeah.
so would be excited to hear about that. Maybe you could be a guest on a later episode when that
Yes.
book comes out. Yeah.
Yes.
So, well, we've talked a lot about your coaching business, your journey as a student yourself, and then as a new special ed teacher. Out of everything we've discussed on the podcast today, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
I would like the listeners to remember that the inclusion model works,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of back and forth about it. And not only does it work, it's the right of every child with a disability. Because I hear a lot of, I read a lot of things about people making it seem like they have a choice in the matter, and they don't. It's in the law. Since the Andrew F. decision, I mean, it's really, we haven't felt the effects because of COVID, but we all, I mean, we're gonna all have our feet held to the fire. So we might as well, adopt these practices, because they are going to be the norm. And and when it's done systematically and with fidelity, it works. It works. I've seen it work. I've seen it work in my own career. So if I want the listeners to remember, because they're probably all educators to some degree, to understand that having children of diverse learning abilities or disabilities, it makes all the kids better. It teaches compassion. It teaches them how to, help someone who is, who's struggling. So I would just say, to not be so resistant, and to embrace inclusion practices, and because it models our being accepting of people and their differences. We have to model that for the children. Maybe we won't have so many problems. And so I think that it's important for the listeners to understand that inclusion works, and that we should really make an effort to make it work.
It's so important to remember, and especially for people who may not have a co-teacher, but do have students with IEPs in their classroom, and just really understanding that this is the best way for them to learn. And, like you said, it teaches other children compassion, gives them a different perspective. So it was great having you on the podcast today. Where can people connect with you, find out more about your business, and maybe see you on social media?
You can follow me on Instagram at at specialedteachersslay.com. And Slay is my framework. That's what I call it because I'm a big Beyonce fan. Or you can follow me on LinkedIn, Valentina White-Rideaux. My website is IDEA Reimagined.com. And I'm on Facebook, Valentina White-Rideaux, and that's where my Facebook group is, where we kind of connect, and we have a community of special educators and other stakeholders where we share information and give advice and all of that good stuff.
Great. I'll make sure I include all that in the show notes. Well, thank you so much for being my guest on the Out of the Trenches podcast today. It was a pleasure having you on.
I had so much fun. Thank you for having me.